4 years, Taylor Swift's life has seemed almost impossible to imagine without a stage somewhere in the background. Airports, stadiums, backstage rooms, recording studios, red carpets, packed schedules, thousands of fans screaming her name. And then there was the Eras Tour. For Taylor, touring wasn't simply another chapter of her career. It became an entire way of life. Night after night, city after city, she was performing one of the biggest shows in music history. But now, according to Taylor herself, something has changed. The tour is over. And instead of immediately searching for the next giant stage, Taylor says she is rediscovering something much quieter. Her hobbies, her home life, and even the surprisingly old-fashioned activities that she apparently loves when she isn't making music. Taylor described her hobbies as the kind of things someone could have enjoyed hundreds of years ago. Painting, cooking, baking, sewing, and, apparently, making children's purses and baby blankets. Yes, Taylor Swift, global superstar, songwriter, performer, and one of the most recognizable people on earth, says she's currently in her sourdough era. And somehow, that might be one of the most revealing details about Taylor's life after the Eras Tour. Because when you've spent years living at an extraordinary speed, sometimes the most meaningful change isn't another huge announcement. Sometimes it's simply having time to sit down and make something with your hands. And there is another reason this interview has Swifties paying close attention. Because while Taylor was talking about her new hobbies and life after touring, she also offered a glimpse into her relationship with Travis Kelce, including details that appear to reinforce speculation that the two are now living together. And then there is the moment involving one of the biggest pieces of Taylor's career history imaginable, her masters. Taylor revealed that Travis was actually at home when she learned she had regained ownership of them. And apparently, she was so excited that she interrupted him while he was playing video games to tell him the news. That tiny detail says so much about how different Taylor's life seems to look now. So today, we're taking a closer look at this fascinating new chapter, the quiet hobbies, the home life, Travis Kelce, and the emotional significance behind Taylor finally having time to simply be Taylor. If you're a Swiftie who loves following every era, every unexpected detail, and every little clue about where Taylor's life is heading next, you're in the right place. This is Taylor Timeline, where we follow not just the headlines, but the moments behind them. And this particular story begins with something Taylor hasn't had nearly enough of in recent years: time. After years on the road, Taylor finally has her time back. Imagine spending years with your life organized around a tour. Your schedule isn't really your own. There are rehearsals, travel, performances, press, preparation, recovery, then another city, another stadium, another audience, another night. For Taylor Swift, that reality became enormous during the Eras Tour. The tour brought her through an extraordinary number of cities and turned the different chapters of her career into one massive live experience. But eventually, even the biggest tour has to end. And once the stage lights went down, Taylor suddenly found herself in a very different position. She wasn't constantly preparing for the next performance. She wasn't living according to the demands of the road. She wasn't waking up and thinking about where the next show was happening. Instead, she could finally return to ordinary things. Taylor explained that she had been on tour for such a long time that now she was enjoying getting her hobbies back. That sentence is easy to overlook. But think about what it actually means. Getting her hobbies back. Not finding completely new hobbies. Not creating another massive professional project. Getting back to things that had been pushed aside. Because there is a strange side effect of extraordinary success. The more successful you become, the more difficult ordinary life can become. For most people, cooking dinner is just cooking dinner. Baking something is just baking something. Sitting down to sew is just sitting down to sew. But for Taylor Swift, even finding time for those things can become complicated when her professional life is operating on such an enormous scale. And now, at least according to what she shared, she's enjoying those simple activities again. There is something almost beautifully ordinary about that. Taylor Swift is not describing a secret luxury vacation or some extravagant new hobby. She's talking about baking. She's talking about sewing. She's talking about painting. She's talking about cooking. She's talking about sourdough. And that might be exactly why so many fans find this part of the interview so interesting. Because after years of watching Taylor perform for millions of people, fans are getting a glimpse of Taylor doing things that don't require an audience at all. Welcome to Taylor's 1700s era. Then came one of the most entertaining parts of Taylor's description of her hobbies. She essentially categorized them as activities someone could have enjoyed in the 1700s. And honestly, once she explained them, it made sense. Painting, cooking, baking, sewing. These are all creative activities, but they're also extremely tactile. They aren't necessarily about performance. They aren't about standing in front of thousands of people. They aren't about hitting a certain streaming number. They're about making something. Taylor also revealed that she's particularly good at making two things: children's purses and baby blankets. That is a very specific skill set. And it immediately raises the most obvious question: what do these purses look like? What do these baby blankets look like? Because Taylor Swift has spent decades turning personal details into art, and now she's apparently spending some of her free time turning fabric into tiny accessories and blankets. Of course, the source doesn't give us photographs of these creations, so we shouldn't pretend to know exactly what they look like. But the fact that Taylor herself described these as things she makes, and that she considers herself very good at them, is already enough to make the image fascinating. This is a side of Taylor that doesn't usually make the headlines. When Taylor Swift trends online, it's normally because of a song, an appearance, a performance, a relationship development, an announcement, or something connected to her enormous career. But this is different. This is Taylor the homebody. Taylor the baker. Taylor the sewer. Taylor the person who apparently has a sourdough project going on. And maybe that's one of the most interesting things about life after a major tour. Once the enormous spectacle disappears, the small things suddenly become visible. The Travis-Kelce connection, of course. There was another major part of Taylor's new routine that fans were listening closely to. Travis-Kelce. The relationship between Taylor and Travis has become one of the most closely followed celebrity relationships in the world. And during this interview, Taylor offered details that appeared to provide another glimpse into what their life together looks like away from cameras. According to the source, Travis had previously hinted that the two were living together, while the pair had also been spotted house hunting. And during the interview, Taylor's comments appeared to reinforce that idea. She mentioned hearing Travis recording episodes of New Heights. That alone is a surprisingly intimate detail. Because New Heights is Travis and Jason Kelce's podcast. For fans, hearing that Taylor is around while Travis is recording provides another little window into what happens when the microphones aren't the only things in the room. It isn't a red carpet moment. It isn't a staged photo. It's an everyday detail. She hears him recording his podcast. He is at home. She is at home. And life is happening around the work. That distinction matters. Celebrity relationships are often presented through highly visible moments. A football game. A concert. A public appearance. A photograph. A vacation. But the moments that actually tell you something about everyday life can be much less dramatic. Someone recording a podcast while their partner is nearby. Someone playing video games. Someone walking into the room because they have something exciting to share. Those are the moments that feel normal. And that's exactly what makes them interesting. The master's moment, then came the detail that may be the emotional center of the entire story. Taylor was at home when she found out that she had regained ownership of her masters. And Travis was there. The source says Taylor found Travis playing video games and barged in to tell him the news. Think about the contrast. For years, Taylor's masters have represented one of the most important and complicated parts of her professional story. Her music isn't just music. Her albums represent different eras of her life. Different versions of Taylor. Different periods of creativity. And ownership of that work carries enormous significance. So imagine receiving the kind of career news that has the potential to make you stop everything. And instead of calling a press conference, instead of immediately making a public announcement, instead of turning it into a carefully staged celebrity moment, Taylor apparently went to find Travis. He was playing video games. And she had news she couldn't wait to tell him. That detail makes the moment feel incredibly human. The story isn't simply about ownership. It's about who was there when Taylor learned the news. Who she wanted to tell. and how naturally that moment apparently unfolded inside their everyday life. There is something almost cinematic about the contrast. One of the biggest professional victories of Taylor's life. And the person she tells is sitting there playing a video game. That is the kind of detail that turns a major headline into a personal story. And importantly, the source doesn't give us a private conversation between Taylor and Travis. So we shouldn't invent one. We don't know exactly what he said. We don't know exactly what she said beyond the fact that she told him the news. But we do know the basic picture presented by the source. Taylor got the news. Travis was home. He was playing video games. And Taylor went in to tell him. Sometimes the smallest details are the ones fans remember. The quiet side of Taylor's life for years, Taylor's public image has been dominated by motion. Even when she wasn't touring, there always seemed to be something happening. A new album. A re-recording. A video. An award. A performance. A major appearance. A new era. Another chapter. The Eras tour amplified all of that. But now we're seeing something different. Taylor is describing what she does when she's not working. And that may be one of the clearest signs yet that life after the tour isn't simply about deciding what professional project comes next. It's about rediscovering who she is outside of the machine. That doesn't mean Taylor has stopped being ambitious. It doesn't mean music has disappeared. It doesn't mean another huge chapter isn't coming. In fact, the source itself points toward an upcoming album and gives an October 3rd release date. So this isn't the story of Taylor Swift walking away from music. It's the story of Taylor having room for other parts of herself alongside music. That's a very different thing. A person can be intensely creative and still want quiet. A person can love performing and still enjoy staying home. A person can be one of the biggest entertainers on earth and still get excited about sourdough. And maybe that is the most relatable part of the entire story. Because fans have watched Taylor's career grow to an almost unimaginable scale. But the things she describes enjoying now are surprisingly simple. Make something. Cook something. Bake something. Sew something. Spend time with someone you love. Enjoy being home. Those aren't glamorous activities. But they can be meaningful ones. Why Swifties are so interested in the home buddy Taylor. There is another reason these details resonate. Taylor Swift has always been deeply connected to storytelling. Her music is built around details. Small moments. Objects. Places. Memories. Relationships. The ordinary becoming extraordinary. So when Taylor herself starts talking about ordinary life, fans naturally pay attention. A baby blanket isn't just a baby blanket when Taylor Swift is the one telling you she makes them. A children's purse isn't just a children's purse. A sourdough project becomes another little piece of the larger picture. And the bigger picture appears to be this: Taylor is enjoying having time again. Time for hobbies. Time at home. Time around Travis. Time away from the constant demands of a tour. And perhaps most importantly, time to create things simply because she wants to. Not because they have to become a hit. Not because they have to be released. Not because millions of people are waiting to see them. Just because she enjoys making them. That's a surprisingly powerful idea for someone whose entire career revolves around creation. The album on the horizon, of course. Swifties aren't going to let Taylor have a quiet hobby era without immediately asking the next question. What comes next? The source points to an upcoming Taylor album, with an October 3rd release date mentioned. That means this peaceful, homebuddy chapter isn't necessarily an ending. It may simply be a transition. Taylor can be baking sourdough today and preparing for another massive musical moment tomorrow. She can be making baby blankets and still thinking about songs. She can be enjoying life away from the stage while another era is already approaching. And that's what makes this moment so interesting. Taylor's life doesn't fit neatly into one category. She's an artist, a performer, a songwriter, a businesswoman, a celebrity, a partner, and, apparently, someone who really enjoys old-fashioned hobbies. The next era doesn't have to erase the previous one. It can grow out of it. After spending so much time on the road, maybe Taylor's next chapter begins not in a stadium, but at home. Not under bright stage lights, but in a kitchen. Not with thousands of people watching, but with a loaf of sourdough. And maybe that's exactly the kind of contrast that makes Taylor's story so compelling. The detail fans may remember most when people eventually look back on this period of Taylor Swift's life. The biggest headlines may be about the album. They may be about her relationship with Travis. They may be about her career. They may be about the ownership of her music. But there is a good chance fans will also remember something much smaller. The image of Taylor getting excited about her hobbies again. Because that is what this story really represents. Not just what Taylor is doing, but what she finally has time to do. After years of performing, traveling, creating, and maintaining a schedule that few people could possibly understand, she is describing a life with room for things that don't have to become headlines. And there is something genuinely refreshing about that. Taylor doesn't have to prove that she is productive every second. She doesn't have to turn every creative impulse into a professional project. Sometimes creativity can simply be fun. Sometimes making something is enough. And if Taylor wants to spend part of her post-tour life baking sourdough, painting, cooking, sewing children's purses, and making baby blankets, then honestly, let the woman have her 1700s era. What this new chapter could mean. The biggest question now isn't whether Taylor is still Taylor. Of course she is. The question is what this new balance might allow her to become. For years, we've watched Taylor build bigger and bigger professional chapters. But perhaps the next chapter isn't about going bigger. Perhaps it's about going deeper. Having time. Having space. Having a home life. Having hobbies. Having people around her who can experience major moments with her privately before the rest of the world hears about them. The Masters moment is a perfect example. To the outside world, ownership of her music is a massive career story. But in the moment described by the source, it was simply Taylor finding Travis and telling him the news. That's the part of celebrity life that fans rarely get to see. Not the headline. The moment before the headline. Not the announcement. The person Taylor wanted to tell first. And that may be one of the most revealing details of all. The story behind the story. There is a tendency to think of Taylor Swift's life as a collection of enormous moments. The awards. The records. The stadiums. The albums. The relationships. The tours. The controversies. The comebacks. The eras. But every enormous story is made up of smaller moments. And this interview gives us several of those smaller moments. Taylor getting her hobbies back. Taylor describing them as almost 1,700 style hobbies. Taylor baking sourdough. Taylor sewing children's purses. Taylor making baby blankets. Taylor hearing Travis record New Heights. Taylor spending time at home. Taylor discovering that she had regained ownership of her masters. And Taylor going to tell Travis while he was playing video games. None of those moments, by themselves, would necessarily define an entire era. Together, however, they paint a picture. A picture of someone whose life appears to be moving into a different rhythm. Still incredibly ambitious. Still incredibly creative. Still surrounded by enormous public attention. But with more space for the ordinary. And perhaps that is the real post-era's tour story. Not that Taylor has become less extraordinary, but that she finally has more room to experience ordinary life. The next era begins differently. Taylor Swift's career has taught fans one thing over and over again. Never assume you know what the next era will look like. The woman who can spend years creating stadium-sized spectacles can also become fascinated by something as simple as baking. The artist who can command an audience of tens of thousands can also find happiness in a hobby that nobody else ever sees. And the global superstar who has spent so much of her life under the spotlight can apparently appreciate being home enough to call herself a homebody. That doesn't make Taylor's next chapter smaller. It makes it more personal. The next album may bring another enormous wave of attention. Another release will create another conversation. Another era will eventually arrive. But perhaps the difference is that Taylor is entering this next phase with something she hasn't always had in abundance. Time to simply live between the big moments. And for someone whose life has been documented so intensely, that might be one of the most valuable things she could possibly have. Because before the next stadium, before the next headline, before the next album, there is Taylor at home. Baking, cooking, painting, sewing, making something with her own hands, and apparently interrupting Travis Kelce while he's playing video games because she has news she absolutely cannot keep to herself. That is the Taylor Swift fans don't always get to see. And maybe it's one of the most interesting versions of her yet. A different kind of Taylor era. When you look at Taylor Swift's journey, it's easy to focus on the enormous moments. The stages, the records, the awards, the sold-out shows, the songs that become part of people's lives. But sometimes, the most revealing moments are much quieter. A woman who spent years on the road finally saying, "I'm getting my hobbies back." A singer who has made a career out of creating, suddenly finding joy in creating things that may never be seen by millions of people. A global superstar spending her free time baking sourdough and making children's purses. And a woman receiving extraordinary news about her music and immediately going to tell the person who happens to be sitting at home playing video games. Those details don't feel like the end of Taylor Swift's story. They feel like the beginning of a different kind of chapter. One where the world is still watching, but where Taylor may finally have a little more time to simply live. And maybe that's what makes this moment so special. Because after every era, there has to be a person underneath it all. And right now, Taylor seems to be giving fans a glimpse of that person. Not just Taylor Swift, the superstar. Taylor Swift, the homebody, the baker, the painter, the sewer, the storyteller, the partner, the artist, and whatever comes next, whether it's another album, another stage, another surprise, or another completely unexpected era, Swifties will be watching. But perhaps this time, they'll also be wondering something a little different. What happens when Taylor Swift finally has time to enjoy the life she spent so many years building? That may be the story of the next era. And if you want to follow every chapter as it unfolds, make sure you're subscribed to Taylor Timeline. Because the biggest Taylor stories aren't always the loudest ones. Sometimes, they're the quiet moments happening at home, before the rest of the world even realizes that a new era has begun.